Year Sixers, welcome to this week's history, still on the Industrial Revolution. For this session you will need a pen and a piece of paper to make some notes, and afterwards you'll need to go to a Google Forms to upload your work and answer some questions. Okay. What was the Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution was a period of tremendous change in Britain which lasted from around 1750 until around 1900. In this period of 150 years, almost every aspect of life in Britain changed. It was the birth of the modern world, and Britain changed from a rural country with small industries to a highly industrialised and wealthy nation. Something that we've been studying for a few weeks there. So industry. An industry is a collection of companies all involved in the same type of production or business. And remember, the main industry in Manchester were the cotton mills. And did you know the word revolution means a huge change? There can be different types of revolutions, such as a political revolution. And this industrial revolution was a slow revolution. If you remember, most revolutions happened quite quickly, but the Industrial Revolution took about 150 years. So this is before the Industrial Revolution in 1750. Before the Industrial Revolution, Britain was an agricultural country. Now remember, agricultural means there was lots of farming. Most people lived on farms growing their own produce and raising their own livestock. The fastest transport for most people was a horse and cart. Most industry, like pottery and weaving, was done at home. They were called cottage industries because goods were manufactured in homes, usually cottages. And if you remember in school, we learnt about the weaving industry, the cotton industry, where they would have small spinning wheels and small looms set up in their houses, whereas when it went to factories, they had the water mills to power it and then the steam engines to power it, with inventions such as the spinning jenny to help the industry move along. Only a small percentage of the population lived in large towns. The total population of Britain was less than 10 million people. And remember, Manchester was a market town, or a town. Although it was known for its fabric and weaving, it was only a town at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And by the end, it's the huge city that we see today. So Britain in 1900. So this is the end of the Industrial Revolution. After the Industrial Revolution, Britain was a country that had changed hugely. Industry had been transformed by key inventions such as the steam engine, which led to the establishment of factories all over the country. Most people lived in large towns near to factories where they worked. Transporting people and goods across the country became much faster with the development of canals, roads and railways. The population of Britain had boomed to around 30 million people, according to the 1901 census. Britain changed so much during the Industrial Revolution that it was almost unrecognisable. For example, a trip from Manchester to London took 4 days in the 1700s, but by 1880 it only took 4 hours. So why was there an Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution occurred because people realised they could use coal and steam to power large machines. These new machines reduced the length of time it took to make something and increased the amount that could be made. And the more products that could be made, the more industries popped up. Sorry, we learnt it last week, and within the bit that I've already read, we've already covered all 6 of the key factors that caused the Industrial Revolution. So pause for a moment, see if you can remember the 6 key factors causing the Industrial Revolution. Okay, let's reveal them. We've got transport. Remember, the line between Manchester and Liverpool was the first railway line that opened. Population boom. In this PowerPoint, we've already seen that it went from 10 million in Britain to 30 million people in Britain. Factories. Lots of factories opened as more machines were built. Agriculture. Agriculture techniques were better, so farms were more efficient, meaning there was more food to feed people. Power. We discovered steam power and other powers, such as the power of water, to be able to power our factories. And then we had the British Empire. Remember, Britain was spreading and covered 1/5 of the land around the world by the end of the Industrial Revolution. That meant that we had access to lots of different resources around the world, and it made Britain a much richer country. Okay, so today we're going to be really focusing on children in the Industrial Revolution. Here's where you need to make some notes. Children as young as 5 were sent to work in factories during the Industrial Revolution. It was important for poor families to send as many members of their family out to work as possible so they could earn as much money as they could. There was no help for poor families except for some charities. If a family couldn't work, they could become homeless and hungry. And this is where the workhouse came in, and we learnt about that 2 weeks ago in our lessons. If you didn't have money, you could be sent to the workhouse, which some considered worse than prison. Children also worked as chimney sweeps, in coal mines, as servants, and in cotton mills. Many were injured by machines or hurt in industrial accidents. Did you know? During this time, the population in Britain boomed to about 30 million people. So because of the way that some children were treated and the way that they had to work if they were part of a poor family, not if they were upper class or middle class, but if they were part of a poor family and they were sent out to work, it was recognised that these children were being exploited, they were not being treated properly. So the government brought in laws to protect these children. So before 1800, school was not free and most poor children only received education in a Sunday school. So they went to Sunday school on a Sunday, they learnt about religion, and they may have also learnt to read, write and count. In 1833, the government passed the Factory Act, making 2 hours of education a day compulsory for children working in factories. The government also granted money to charities to help schools for the first time. So at this point, lots of children were working in factories, and that's where they would have to work for the rest of their lives, and possibly not having a better job within the factory because they couldn't read or write. So the government said, actually, if you're getting these children to work hard, then you also need to make sure they get an education so they can read and write and better themselves. Then in 1844, the Ragged Schools Union was set up to give schooling to very poor children. So the children then had the chance to get an education to be able to get a job. These would have been for children who were living on the streets, possibly like Jim in The Street Child. In 1870, Forster's Act was set up state-funded board schools for primary education. So this is where children of primary school age, our school age, could be sent to school. In 1880, the Education Act made school attendance compulsory for children between ages of 5 and 10. Before then it wasn't compulsory, so poorer families could make their children still go out to work to earn money, whereas when it was made compulsory and children had to attend, their parents couldn't send them out to work. Instead, they were given the same opportunity as other children to be able to read, write and get a better job. In 1902, the Education Act established a system of secondary schools. So to begin with, education was just about learning to read and write, to get the basics to allow children to live a better life. But then when secondary schools opened in 1902, the schools could specialise and more subjects could be taught. Why do you think the government felt it was important for all children to have an education? So if you couldn't read or write, what other things couldn't you do? There are many jobs that rely on being able to read and write and count, and so the children needed to have that education to allow them to go on to do other things. So finally, do you think the Industrial Revolution had a positive or negative effect on the children of Britain? This isn't all children. Think about the different classes of children. Think about some of the positive and some of the negative effects, because it wouldn't have been positive for all and it wouldn't have been negative for all. When you've finished making notes on this video, click onto the Google Forms. Some of the questions have scores, so some of them are multiple choice and you can get a score, whereas some of them you need to fill out your answer and what you think based on what you've heard in this video. I look forward to seeing your answers on Google Forms.